It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogside Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business empire and all its transfer portal glory. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing fine, man. It's the weather's finally turned on here in Texas. Thank God we're into the 80s and whatnot for the most part. So I'm doing good. I'm distressed though. I missed the Black Crowes show. I was telling you I was going to go do the Black
what
Crowes.
happened?
So this is my fault. This is my stupidity. So I was going to wait till the bitter end to get tickets to this thing, like the day of. And so then I get to the office checking, because I checked the night before, price still hadn't dropped. I go into the office and Ticketmaster decides my phone is a bot and won't let me
pinging their app too many times.
I guess I don't know why. So I think so, but the venue was downtown Houston, which is where I was, and so I was just going to walk down there. Then I got tied up in this long crisis meeting, like way across town and everything. And I got out of that at like 5 o'clock. I just totally forgot. So I just went home and I realized it. I was sitting home at like 9 o'clock and said, you know what? I just missed the Black Crowes for the first time in like years. So that's totally my stupidity. And I just blew it. So,
Cheap Steve beat out entertainment Steve there.
Well, yeah, that is exactly what happened, because it would have saved me $50 or whatever, however much it would have been. And I was going to be proud of myself. And then I totally blew it. So,
well, I guess you saved 100% of the money.
There you go. That is what I like to hear. There you go.
It was 100% value.
100% savings.
That's pretty
so
funny.
No Black Crowes report.
But maybe, Texas is a big state. Maybe you can go somewhere to see him.
I've got a couple of my college friends want me to go do this and that, and I've got a couple of these things. So I think the Black Crowes are just going to have to come back to Houston.
Oh, well, there you go. So Brothers Robinson, please get along enough to circulate back to Houston.
Yeah, that's no guarantee. That's going to happen.
That's the wild card here. Well, this is going to be a bit of I don't know. There's so many bubbling stories that sort of connect with the longtime themes of the show. Plus, they're constantly in the news, and so this week's episode is kind of a little bit like that. Right away, batting leadoff. Kind of what was the big theme of our show last week, or the big topic a couple weeks ago, is this Ohtani stuff, which just continues to, unfold. And I've been in a situation where I've been having to watch way too much kind of like nightly news, corporate media type stuff. And it is a top first 15 minutes of a news broadcast level story at this point. This gambling scandal, crime, intrigue, international, cross borders. Steve, I know that you've been enmeshed in the legal beagle documentation. What are you seeing?
This story is actually more nuts than we thought when we originally talked about this 2 weeks ago. So what has happened now is that a criminal complaint has been filed. I am not, to be clear, in the white collar federal crime world. Okay. But, so I don't claim expertise in this branch of law necessarily, but there hasn't been charges filed against them. There's a complaint filed by a federal investigator. It's 37 pages long in federal court for the Central District of California, which, by the way, isn't Southern California, weirdly. So I don't know why that is, but yeah, what's that about? So as it turns out, this thing goes into great detail about the communications between Ippei Mitsuhara and this unidentified bookkeeper. It lists a whole bunch of text messages back and forth. So one, this is the very definition of gambling addict. The allegation 2 weeks ago was that he had stolen $4.5 million. I think it was. It's actually $16 million, not $4.5 million. And what this complaint alleges is that Mitsuhara did, in fact, hack in basically into Ohtani's bank account, change passwords, to allow him access without Ohtani's knowledge, impersonated Ohtani on the phone with the bank to get wires out. Really, really bad stuff. And in terms of the bookkeeper, there's a list of pages and pages of text messages between him and the bookkeeper, or what they're calling bookkeeper, or the bookkeeper, the number two guy, where he continually asks for bumps, quote bumps. And a bump to me is drugs.
It's cocaine, yeah, generally. But I think that's where it comes. I think it's just the same. It's the metaphor applied to gambling. So one more hit, one more bump. It's just like, it's the same concept and the same origin, just applied to gambling.
Yeah, that's kind of because it was, give me a bump, just another 50 grand, another 200.
One more.
Yeah. And the guy always said yes because he's got Ohtani behind him. And the we'll go through this in more detail, but the best part of this, and congratulations on being well written here. And so the very last quote that they put in here is, I'm going to read this one. On or about March 20th, 2024, Mitsuhara messaged Bookkeeper One saying, "Have you seen the reports?" Bookkeeper One, meaning the reports that are in the media. Bookkeeper One responded, "Yes, but that's all BS." They used the real word. "Obviously, you didn't steal from him. I understand it's a cover job. I totally get it." Mitsuhara then responded to Bookkeeper One, "Technically, I did steal from him. It's all over for me." And that's a quote that they are alleging is out of Mitsuhara's phone, because Mitsuhara stupidly gave them consent to allow them to go through his phone. And so I mean, just for the record, if you're a gambling addict who's working with an illegal bookkeeper, bookie, don't just hand over your phone without them getting a warrant first. Just FYI. My thoughts is that this is nuts. We can go into it, but your thoughts, your initial thoughts on this new development.
Well, so here's what the question I'm going to kind of ask you, since you've been way more in the details and you're a legal expert. The conventional wisdom on this, almost since it broke, or a strand of conventional wisdom, has been that this was all front for Ohtani gambling, and this guy's going to be a fall guy, et cetera, et cetera. Does this filing and disabuse that theory, or does it muddy the waters even more?
Oh, it throws the theory out the window, is what it does. If true, you always have to take these into context. This is a one-sided complaint filed by an investigator. So if taken to be true, then Ohtani's off the hook. He's a victim. They've identified Ohtani in the complaint as a victim,
right?
Not as a conspirator. And the fundamental allegation. See, the story that you could tell that you're alluding to is, if Mitsuhara is a front, Ohtani's been the gambling person. Mitsuhara's the go-between, basically the mule for the money, more or less, at worst. Or Ohtani's helping cover it up. That is not what this says at all. What this says is Mitsuhara is a felon. He stole money repeatedly over and over and over and over again. He's working with illegal bookkeepers on his own. The last thing I just read to you, it's Mitsuhara allegedly admitting guilt inadvertently in a text. That's the other thing. If you're going to commit a crime, don't admit to it in a text message. That's, criminal law 101. Don't do that. So no, I think if it shakes out like this, I think Ohtani, and by extension, Major League Baseball and the Dodgers, will all be off the hook, because legitimately, without any tainting of the facts, Ohtani would be a victim here. It's more, if you read into this, the agent for Ohtani's agent never talked to Ohtani without Mitsuhara present. The story they tell is Mitsuhara was able to pull this off because he was everything to Ohtani. It was not just like, I'm the translator. Yeah. See you tomorrow, boss. I'll meet you at the. No, this guy is Ohtani's do everything guy. And the agent stupidly never, ever, even when, they were, this goes into some stories about, and other media reports about how the agent and the accountants are now having trouble and don't understand, the accounting for Ohtani and whatnot. The agent never thought to go, how about let's go get another translator? How about bring my own translator? You're in California. There's a million Japanese speaking people in California. Never did that. Just trusted this Mitsuhara guy until it blew up. So there's a lot of negligence in here. Ohtani's negligent. Pay attention to your bank account, or get a professional accountant to give you, weekly or monthly reports. There's a lot of ways celebrities and high profile people can do it.
If you're looking to make close to $1 billion in a country over the span of your career, which is what we're looking at too, because it's not like he was being paid peanuts as a California Angel.
Right.
So we could probably, we're getting close to $1 billion in career. I'm not even talking about Japan, where he was already super. I'm just saying in the U.S.
in dollars.
Yeah, in dollars. It maybe, and I don't even mean this in a
800
jingoistic
million
way. Learn the language, just for your, like you have that, you have almost $1 billion riding on that. You'd think you'd get, conversational English down, like where you can't. Nobody
He's not brand new. He's been here for years.
Yeah. Somebody worth that much money should not have single points of failure. And this is really what this was, is creating this guy to be a single point of failure. So if, for whatever nefarious things he was doing, or if he just walked across the street and got hit by a bus, for heaven's sakes, you can't have it where something that's worth that much, you need checks and balances. You'd have if you live in a hurricane zone, you get a generator. You know what I mean? You can't live this carefree, or this is going to happen. In fact, this may just be the biggest version of this that we know of. But if you're that unaware, it's like, come on.
Athletes are dumb. And I have a generator in my garage. Have to use it. Yeah, no, I agree. And the other thing is, if I had 800 million or thereabouts in career earnings, I'd have the entire Price Waterhouse Cooper behind me, or
right. Your agent should have their own interpreter. Your accountant should have their own interpreter.
I'd have a major
professional should have an interpreter.
I'd have a major accounting firm behind, because you get people don't understand. It's the same. This is why lottery winners go broke. They don't know what they're doing. I may have told this story before, but at one point I was in two major law firms. And one point we had a client who had won millions of dollars in the lottery. He knew enough to know he needed a major law firm, but he didn't know enough to know that he had to listen. We had these, accountants lined up and investment guys and everything. And the guy just kept saying, yeah, I don't care about any of that. I want to know, can I write a check for this house? That, it was those kind of questions. It was never a long-term strategic plan. And here Ohtani's got millions and millions of dollars, first of all, in a bank account. And, newsflash, neither Chris nor I have that much money, but we know enough to know that people who are incredibly wealthy don't have tons and tons of totally liquid, just cash laying around. They go into funds, they go in investments, and there's a strategy. There's high risk, low risk, all kinds of things. Ohtani's just got millions and millions and millions, enough millions of dollars in a bank, a simple bank account, that he did not notice that $16 million was gone. Okay.
Yeah. This is pre-Dodgers contract.
Yes. Pre-Dodgers contract. Now, to be fair, most of the Dodgers contract hasn't been paid out, but still, because Ohtani made a ton of money in Japan. People need to understand this.
Yeah.
He was a major star in Japan.
He's no pauper when he came to play in Major League Baseball.
No, not at all. And so it's Ohtani's at fault. Now, Ohtani's a victim for sure, but this is a classic example of what not to do and how not to handle yourself when you come in a major wealth.
Well, it's like walking down the street with your wallet dangling 3/4 outside your back pocket.
Yes, that's exactly right. And in terms of the language thing, I agree with Chris. We're not trying to be racist or anything, but you come here to the United States, you're a major star, you have a lot of money. It would nobody's saying, from a civil rights perspective, you can't speak whatever language you want, but it's to your benefit to understand what is going on around you, so you don't have to rely on one asshole that has your passwords. One crook. And this guy is a major gambling addict. This guy is the equivalent of a meth head under the bridge in terms of gambling. Okay. Major problem. And if you want my legal analysis, there are, tens of felonies in here, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Each one of these transactions he did is going to be a felony.
Right. They're major larcenies, right?
Each one. Yes. Each one separately. and then all the interactions with the bookie, that's going to be a bunch of felonies.
Right, because California is not a legal gambling state.
Correct. And there's going to be federal like wire fraud and stuff charges and things like that too. This guy has got enough to put him away for life if the prosecutor wants to do it. That is how serious this is. Not like Clinton Portis, writing receipts for healthcare thing. Remember that story we did?
Yeah, like equipment. So like I need a
50,000
generator.
Yeah, $50,000 an oxygen generator, whatever. This is millions of dollars with. If he did 20 separate transactions, that's going to be like 40 felonies. I'm making up the numbers, but it's a lot. And the federal criminal law, the federal sentencing guidelines does not give a lot of leeway to judges. If you go to state courts, like in Texas, the state judges have a ton of leeway. Most states, the judges have a ton of leeway. That's why you get political arguments about the impact of the Soros prosecutors, and all that stems from leeway in federal and state law. Federal sentencing guidelines are very specific. They're objective. They have criteria that it's a point system, and this means this. And this Ohtani is going to be screwed.
Well, not Ohtani, the other.
Sorry, Matsuhara is going to be screwed.
Now,
really and truly.
To your point there, and you made it a few minutes ago, just it could not. Well, if this all turns out the way this filing would suggest, Major League Baseball, the LA Dodgers, and Ohtani have got to be breathing a huge sigh of relief. Yes. And that's why the conspiracy theories will stay bubbling, right? Because those three have so much riding on this that there will always be, and paranoia and it just means you're being careful to some degree, right? Like that when those three powerful entities have something that they need to happen, that it'll happen. But they are just in a much better place than they were 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God, yes. And listen, I think that no matter what, like Chris and I are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Everybody knows that. But I think the extreme political climates today on both sides, you can blame Trump for being a moron. You can blame, the Democrats for some of the Trump Russia stuff and all of these things. What it's caused, I'm not here to judge any of it, in this show, but what that has caused is a lot of distrust on multiple sides of the societal spectrum of the government and of investigations and of the legal system. Some are right, some are wrong. And so what we have here is when you mention conspiracy theories, there's going to be probably more distrust because this is probably an FBI agent and it's unidentified and this agency is unidentified, but I assume this is an FBI agent filing this. Well, there's a whole segment of society that doesn't trust the FBI in any capacity. And you may have issues with, the political stuff, but the bulk of the FBI are doing legitimate investigations. Okay. It's all not just, go get Biden or go get Trump or whatever. But there's going to be people that just throw this in the trash can and go, And I think more so now because of the current climate. And that is part of the problem when you don't have I can't believe I'm going to use Overton window twice in 2 shows, but like an Overton window of reasonable discussion about issues, when it goes so broad that you're on the insane or part of the mainstream on both sides, you get things like, it's a cover up, Ohtani did it, whereas years ago, you might take this more at face value and go, you know what, the FBI agent filed a 37-page affidavit, notarized statement in federal court, maybe we ought to take it seriously.
With receipts, as the kids say. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. With they didn't put images of the text messages in here, but
they have them.
They have them. Right. Yeah. And this is like not an open and shut case, but it looks really bad for Mitsuhara. And I'll tell you, the feds have like a 96% or something like that conviction rate because their resources are so vast that they don't file cases until they got them nailed. They wouldn't have done this unless they had everything.
I think it's an interesting, for sort of building on what you're saying, this case is an interesting cipher for me because it's inherently apolitical, right? I mean, there's actually,
right. There's no
you
politics
have to really dig around to find any political aspect of this.
Correct.
And then thus, it shows that when people can take their politics aside, it still then shows what a high distrust of systems, of evidence, of facts, and it like because across all kinds of spectrums, people's first initial reaction is cover up, right? Like it's like then many of them may read or follow it and like, oh, okay, that seems pretty. I'm not saying they can't be brought along, but everyone's knee jerk reaction to these kind of things now, especially when there's like the politics is completely leveled and the fix is in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look at like OJ Simpson died this week, right? And a lot of people have revisited the OJ Simpson trial. And I believed at the time, and I wasn't a licensed attorney at the time and any of that, but my view of it at the time was that there was he did it, right? We know he killed those people, but I thought there was reasonable doubt created at trial because of the incompetence of the prosecutors and the defense attorneys kind of ran laps around him. And there were some major gaps. The glove didn't fit, the racist, all those things that they tore apart the DNA guy. Point is, there was a racial component to it. Sure, probably. But I got just torn apart this week by a couple of people that I mentioned this to who were on my side of the political aisle. I was like, but listen, I mean, you got to look at it factually. Not everything is a giant conspiracy. Sometimes, it literally is what it is. Sometimes if you get up there and you have a defendant put a glove on that doesn't fit, well, some jurors, yes, yes. And that's kind of follows along with what you're saying here. It's like people need to put aside the wild conspiracies and biases and take a look at the facts for what they are. We have a 37-page affidavit by probably an FBI agent that has 20, 30 quotes in here, at least, if not more.
Person got gambling addiction, which is a known thing. This is not some made up thing, right? Everyone acknowledges gambling addiction is real. It's not fake. Who had unfettered access to millions of dollars. I mean, that's not that complicated.
No, it's not. It's not a giant conspiracy, and it's not a giant conspiracy. But to the baseball part of it, the Dodgers have got to be like throwing a party right now. They're having like a wild blowout in the Dodgers front offices somewhere, about this. Because can you imagine? I mean,
heck, he even gets sympathy, right? Like he even comes out like a
yes,
victim vibe.
Because the Dodgers in particular, I mean, they just came from the Trevor Bauer incident. I don't think did we talk about Trevor Bauer on this show? I can't remember. So. The short version of Trevor Bauer is that the Dodgers signed him 2 or 3 years ago or something like that, and he probably got accused of sexual assault. And the story was crazy. And as it turns out, the truth is somewhere in the middle. The allegations it was very rough sexual activity, and he was physically rough. And as it turns out, then he ended up being able to produce quotes and text messages and images of screenshots and stuff where she was basically a gold digger. And he alleged all along it was consensual and, all this. And the criminal case got dropped. And they kind of let him off the hook. But the point is, the Dodgers just can't. He was Dodgers. And they just came from that. And they're finally past Trevor Bauer. And then Ohtani drops in her lap. And promptly 5 minutes later, almost literally 5 minutes later, not literally at all, metaphorically 5 minutes later, then he's accused of being a gambling addict. So it was like a string of press that was bad. But if this is true, it would have to be one of the bigger cover-ups in American criminal law history at this point, I think.
I'll take a quick 30 seconds to make a sports only observation. I watched a little bit of a Dodgers game the other day. That is an insane top of the lineup. Those first three hitters are it's ludicrous.
And Ohtani hasn't even really gotten going this year so far.
Yeah, either. I mean, 3x MVPs in the first three batters. That's crazy.
Max Muncy, yeah. It's crazy. Nuts. I mean, their pitching is, Clayton Kershaw isn't even in there yet. He's on DL, so just wait. The Dodgers are stacked this year.
Yeah, no, they are. All right, so that was our real sports break for the moment.
Back to the law, sports law, media.
I'm sure we'll talk about Ohtani more as this unfolds because this filing is just step one in this case.
Yeah. So the next step would be this is a criminal complaint. The next step would be for the Justice Department to file charges against him. And like I told you, it's complicated. They're going to tear this thing apart. And like each one of these transactions they're describing are multiple separate felonies. And so it takes a while to get through this. I'm sure they're working on it already, but it's going to be I'm going to have to print another 50-page document at some point when the charges get filed. We'll
look forward to that. People, pins and needles. The next there's sort of a couple massive sports media business stories, ones that kind of hit all the elements. And that was just the there's no other way to call it, crazy town numbers for really kind of from the Elite Eight onwards in women's college basketball. But obviously, kind of with that starting with the LSU Iowa game and then going through the national championship game. And it was 18.7 million people watched that women's final on a Sunday at 3:30 in the afternoon. Just for, so many points of context about this. I find the one that's the most compelling, even more so that it beat out like the men's final, is that the average audience for an NFL regular season game is 17 and change.
Yeah. I think this is probably the high watermark for women's sports, particularly women's basketball. Right now, we've had some periods of Olympics and World Cup soccer that have achieved major ratings. Like the U.S. women's gymnastics team at times has had major international coverage and ratings. The track team at the Olympics.
I don't think this though. I don't think those.
Well, no, I don't think it's the gymnastics maybe, but not track. But the WNBA would have been bankrupt a long time ago, but for the NBA, subsidizing it. And this is really the first time I can remember that women's basketball has made it on its own. And what's weird to me is that Caitlin Clark isn't even like a outspoken personality. She's not some like flashy person who has a major media presence, to my knowledge. It's just been her performance on the court.
She has a lot of on the court personality, I would say.
Yeah,
like she's very emotive. I mean, yes, I agree. She's not like a great pitch woman or anything like that, but she does play with a lot of on the court style, a lot of showboat and stuff.
Fair, but I guess what I was talking about
was fun. That's not a critique. I'm just saying, but she does have a court personality.
She's not on Entertainment Tonight. She's not in commercials. She's not in Hollywood. She may be, but my point is, it built up based on her performance on the court, is what I'm saying. And it didn't hurt that she broke the NCAA scoring record, either.
Well, I think it's, I was curious. So I went back and looked at their numbers for the final starting in, what is it, 2002. So just like
the ratings, you mean?
Yeah, the total audience. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And there's a couple interesting things because it tells a story. The numbers tell a story here. In 2002, they had an audience of 4.8 million, which, quite frankly, is a decent audience. And I mean, if you started to compare that to playoff and any NHL, Major League Baseball, it'd be competitive.
Your average primetime show would be pretty decent.
So they had a decent base. What I described that. Interesting. In 2023, so last year, it basically doubled to 9,900,000, which again is a perfectly respectable audience size for a major telecast sporting event. And that was the kind of you had the Caitlin Clark kind of was emerging. That game had a lot of juice coming out of it because that was the whole is she insulting Caitlin Clark? The other, started the LSU. Yeah. So that game actually had the sports talk was driven even a couple days after that game by some of that stuff. So and then it doubles again in this year. It goes from 9.9 million to 18.8. So from 2022 to this year, you see exponential growth year to year, which to me, we've seen other, whether you're talking Dawn Staley, Cheryl Swoops, Rebecca Lobo, but there have certainly been massive college basketball stars that went on to have Olympic and NBA and WNBA careers. So that's not that strange in and of itself. It's almost like it is like a perfect storm scenario, right? You saw growth anyway, so there was a momentum in one direction without Caitlin Clark. Then you have almost an epic final last year that just set all the narratives into place, and then you have this year that plays out almost perfectly. They go head to head in a, well, I guess that was an Elite
That
Eight
was
game.
the lead, yeah.
Yeah, but still huge. And so it is a perfect storm. I think what everyone will be interesting to watch, and I think is what we see a trend, or if a trend, is where's the new watermark? Because there's never, you're right. It may never be reached again, or you're going to need, she crossed into pop culture. I mean, which is what you need to anything to gain these kind of numbers. So for whatever reason, she did. But what's the new normal? And if this raises the new normal 1, 2, 3, 4 million average, and you look back a couple years and you see that growth already, that's what'll be interesting. What's the new normal because of this? What is the return to mean?
Well, yeah. And what is the mean?
Right.
18 million is not the mean.
No, but if they were to start getting 9 to 10 million every final, they
Right.
all involved would be pleased as punch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course they would. Absolutely. And then the follow on to that is WNBA. Will the WNBA get to a point where it will be able to sustain itself finally? The Sports Business Journal talked about this. There's a column, WNBA plans for Clark's impact with increase in national broadcast for Fever.
I think she's all but like 3 games are like nationally televised.
Yeah, right. Yeah, dated 4/11. It's uncredited in terms of authors, but yeah, apparently I didn't know there was an Indiana Fever, but they have the number 1 pick in the draft, and she's going to be the number 1 pick. And so, yeah, they all their games. It's every game is going to be there's going to be nationally televised, essentially, for them. So yeah, what is the new normal is the real question, because again, we've seen some of this before. We saw what was the nickname? I can't remember the nickname, but there was like the women's gymnastics team in the 90s, the 96, 92, 96 Olympic. They were major stars for a while. And then you've got Dominique, what's the young lady?
One?
Yeah, her name escaped me, but she's a star, but it kind of resets. Yeah, see, Chris is I can see he's about to type because it's bothering him too. She's from Houston. I should know who this is. Anyway, but the thing with gymnastics is it goes away for 4 years. Basketball is every year. And so I don't think it's going to reset down to 0 for women's basketball. I do think there's going to be a little bit higher normal. I don't think it's going to be what everybody believes, because Caitlin Clark is kind of a unique player. She's the most successful basketball player in college basketball history. And that includes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, includes all kinds of people.
Simone Biles, by the way.
There you go. Simone Biles. So I don't think it's going to be what people think, but I think the bar has been raised to something above what it was.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably undeniable, and it will be fascinating to see, what the new average is. And I do think it's, and this is where we're kind of on so many fronts, right? Like, it's just like pick an angle, it's a hall of mirrors, but about the transformation that's going on in college sports. And one thing that kind of might be the ultimate driver is actually how popular college sports is, and it's a longer tail as well. But and anytime you see, the front of the line surge, it has repercussions down the chain. But whether it's paying players, whether it's what kind of leagues that they're going to need to manage this, whether it's what are the actual kind of, let's call them team management rules and student mobility rules that need to go into place. We're living it. It's not even a coming thing. Such massive change on all levels of college sports, because then you have to okay, so if you do siphon off some, here are our top 2 revenue earners, and you include things like women's volleyball and things that also, are very respectable businesses in their own context. And then what's everybody else, right? Like, so where do those lines get drawn, and what's a real sport and what's not a real sport, and Title IX and all of that stuff. To me, to kind of connect with one of the themes of our show, or the theme of our show, is there's a the profit motive is driving all of this, right? It actually is successful. And so they might say, oh, well, that 12 months of the year news cycle for movement is good. People are staying in college longer because they can earn a living. So you get teams to make runs, or you get players that you can follow their careers. All of those things, the profit motives are only going to be pushing just massive change.
Well, yeah. I mean, as an example, Caitlin Clark and the young lady from LSU, whose name I also can't remember right now, those two alone are responsible for a fairly significant portion of the increase in ratings, right? This is what we've been talking about. Is it therefore fair that they should share in the profits, in the increased profits? Certainly not of the TV networks, but if the schools make more money because of the increased ratings and increased media attention, should Caitlin Clark and her counterpart in LSU,
Angel Reese,
there you go, who I think is obnoxious, just by the way, but that's neither here nor there. Should they share in the profits? And that's come in the central question, for a generation. There's an active lawsuit right now, as we talked about it a few weeks ago, if I recall. I mean, at the end of the day, in my view, they're still amateurs. Theoretically, they're not in reality, but they're college kids and they should be amateurs. But at the same time, if they're putting in all this labor and Caitlin Clark's responsible for millions and millions of people watching that they otherwise wouldn't, is she not do something?
Some like think tank, or I think university, like urban planning department or something along those lines, some data nerds in that realm. I think they had like an estimate of Caitlin Clark's addition to the Iowa economy. Now they got all kinds of like weird ways they calculate that, and you can probably argue and those downstream effects or whatever, but I think it was like 6 billion or whatever in additional like revenue within Iowa. This is like parking and motels and all kinds of stuff, but like that's the kind of thing that let's study this. What is the impact downstream?
Well, yeah, that's kind of my point, is like, I'm sure we probably would dispute some of what they're talking about, but it's certainly fair to say that the attendance at the games, the live attendance is greatly up. People travel to see her. The downstream impact of parking in restaurants and shopping and hotels and whatnot.
And I think they were calculating things even like increased tuition revenue at University of Iowa because of the profile change and stuff. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You're getting into some layers of nuance.
Yeah, but at some level, she's responsible for some of it.
Yeah.
Without doing anything, she's responsible for
no, we're debating the numbers, not the idea.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, this is kind of one of the central themes of this show for a couple of years is amateurism in college sports. We've talked about NIL on this show a lot, and there's another story. I'll get it here in a second. It has become free agency, but it's not just free agency in an NFL/NBA/ Major League Baseball standard. It is free agency without contracts involved. There's no limit to what these players can do. Like Caitlin Clark could have been recruited last year by another university. They could have offered her millions of dollars in ad revenue, and she could have moved to UCLA or any other school. She didn't, but that's what could be done. And the NCAA only has itself to blame for this, of course, because they didn't, as we said, they didn't have to do what they've done. But what they have created is a system of totally unfettered free agency. And before I let Chris talk, the article that, for those who want to read about this, is on The Athletic: How the Transfer Portal Changed College Football Quarterback Recruiting, Constant Chess Game, Antonio Morales, Thursday, April 11th. But it's what the NCAA has created is insane. It's the only way to put it, I think.
And I think the thinkers in college athletics, and I'm not saying, notice I didn't say the thinkers within the NCAA, but the thinkers,
that's an oxymoron.
yeah, but the thinkers within the world of college athletics. So I'm, university presidents, blah, blah, blah. Right. Those that have some responsibility to this. I think what I've noticed in these articles that we cited, and like a trend that's probably relatively recent, is, okay, let's get out in front of this, right? Like, let's be proactive in shaping what we want, not being hyper reactive, because the reaction is already happening. And so I think the smart voices are, okay, how do we actually rebuild it? So we saw drips of sort of stories, and these are still like theories, or this could happen, or somebody kind of talking out loud. But just in the last couple of weeks, there's been a report that Fox is looking to start their own postseason college basketball tournament, which I find nuts, but whatever. But because they know they can make money putting stuff on TV, right? Like, so like, let's create another fake tournament, beyond the who doesn't make the NIT and the NCAAs is crazy, but that in talks. We're seeing reports of something that Steve and I have basically been saying was almost a fait accompli years ago, which is a football super conferences, or maybe men's basketball and Super Bowl. But what's the Super League, not conference? What's the Super League? And that conversation has begun. Obviously, the conversations around, are they employees? How do you pay them? Is already happening. And I think you're starting to see influencers and decision makers in the world of college athletics start to say, hey, it's all broken anyway. And the audience is surging. There's a way to remake this in a way that benefits most or all. And I'm talking about financially.
Yeah. How do you remake, or do you need to remake women's college basketball as a result? With this, how do they make more money? How do you capitalize on it? Caitlin Clark will not be there next year. Angel Reese, I think, is also a senior. Is she not?
I think she's announced she's heading to the draft.
Right.
There are some young superstars that now
are there though?
Yeah, there are. There's a super freshman in USC, that like was already top in the league as a pure freshman. And the reality is they're going to have gotten more exposure over the last couple of years, and probably the next couple of years. So it's going to be, and they're going to know how to make stars in a little bit different way, probably.
Well, this comes back to what you were saying originally, which is, what is the new normal?
Yeah.
For this, and it's complicated by by the status of the NCAA, as you suggested. I mean, it's much more complicated because the transfer portal is wide open. So this star that you're talking about at USC, was it USC?
USC, yeah.
She could move tomorrow to Georgia, and nobody would have a leg to stand on about it. Like this column in the Athletic column, it's talking about Julian Sand, who was the number one quarterback in the 2024 cycle, signed with Alabama originally, started classes at Alabama, and then when Saban retired, it says the family started to consider other options. A lot of, what if we went into the portal? What are the options in my head? What it looked like before? What looks good now? The fact that they can have this conversation at all, is such a monumental shift in the way the NCAA operates. And I just repeat, they did this to themselves. There is a difference between saying players, state legislatures in a courtroom saying players can profit off their name, image, and likeness, versus let's create an unfettered buyer's market by allowing totally unregulated transfers. And so Justin Sand, as he should, from his own perspective, comfortable, where can we make the most money? Should we leave Alabama? Well, we can, maybe we will, let's see. And that goes for college, women's college sports now too, I think.
Obviously, yeah, I think it even goes for lesser sports. You're just, to some degree, you're just talking about lesser amounts of money.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not college football, but the same could be said for.
You might be talking of tens of thousands versus tens of millions, right. But I think it's happening. So the USC freshman is Juju Watkins, true freshman. For her first 29 games, has already amassed 800 points. So she could be gunning for that Caitlin Clark record by the time she's a senior.
Yeah, and just to dive into sports a little bit, the record Caitlin Clark broke was Pistol Pete Maravich. And I can't let this go without saying that Pistol Pete played in the era without the 3-point shot. And so it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison. If you factor in what Pistol Pete would have scored if the 3-point line had been there, it might have been a different story, but that's neither here nor there.
That's why in all sports, when you open the lens so far that you're dealing with historical errors, it's so different.
Yeah. And the other thing would be that in men's college basketball, zero elite players make it 4 years. Most of them make it one.
Although
now they can, because
now
they're all
they
making
might,
millions of
because
dollars.
if they bank 10, 12 million over 4 years, we touched on the quarterback issue a little bit, and it's fascinating here too, because if you're kind of a little bit more like me and you kind of pick up, you have time for pro football more than college football. So by the time you get to draft season, you're sort of just playing catch up or taking others of people's opinions and kind of applying it to the draft. Well, one of the big things you've seen with these quarterbacks is like, well, who are the guys that are 23, 24? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Do you want a guy who actually clocked 4 to 5 years of college game time and what that experience is? Or have we now seen the extension of his development? And is the ceiling not going to be that much higher because we sort of seen who he is at 24? It is actually completely reshaping why you would stay in college, because if you are a dubious pro, or that you're getting feedback that you're going to have to really clean some things up to make it to get to a second contract, really, which is what every NFL player's goal is, really, big or small, is to get to a second contract. If you make it first. Then you're going to see these college quarterbacks, you're going to be talking about, like, am I going to risk a 20-year-old or am I going to risk the 24-year-old?
Well, yeah. And does the 24-year-old have injuries that impact him
but
too?
more wear and tear, et cetera.
A ton of, injuries. This as an example. So yeah, it's a different dynamic, than it used to be. And you could transfer before, but the rule was you had to sit out a year.
Yeah, that went away a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, it did. That was the moment that college really transformed itself, was when you get rid of the 1 year sit out period, then it becomes free agency. And so if people transferred before, they tended to be older because they had to sit out a year, and so they're not burning a year of eligibility. But now you've got like Bo Nix, played six, it was there for 6 years between Auburn and Oregon, as an example. I've said it before. It's hurt my ability to appreciate college football like I used to, because I don't have as much emotionally invested in it now. If it's just a bunch of, highly paid free agents versus college students, to me, that's a difference.
I probably lean that way in terms of like what I end up watching. And I would have guessed that would have been if I was, making educated guesses and, someone would reveal the answer to me after I chose one, I would guess that your view would be the dominant one, or at least would sway audience, but it just does, the data suggests otherwise.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly a handful of people, but I think I'm in a distinct and large minority, or small minority is what I'm saying.
I think large chunks of college athletics, there's people waking up to that this is a crisis tunity, and that they're really focusing on the tunity part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to go back to the women's, issue, Caitlin Clark is an opportunity. The question is how it's going to be handled. How can you capitalize and make her a star in women's college sports going forward? Will it continue? The woman who who got arrested and thrown in Russian prison.
Yeah.
She was, she was supposed to be the next star too, and transform the NBA or the WNBA, because she was an elite talent, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't at all. It totally fell flat. In terms of ratings, whatnot, made no difference whatsoever. And so it's possible that happens again. And so what can the WNBA do to use her appropriately? I mean, time will tell, I think. But in terms of go ahead.
Here's an interesting thing to watch. And I can't find an answer to this. But if she plays on the U.S. Olympics team this summer, that will be. I mean, there are NBC executives sacrificing chickens in their backyard to make sure that this happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
if she's on the U.S. Olympic team this summer, it will be ginormous.
Yeah.
Ginormous, and could be a huge thing for it. I think if you wanted to flow as much of the momentum into the WNBA, then putting her plus, 7 or 8, 10 other like top line players. And I think it's Lisa Leslie, I think, is the coach or somehow involved. So like you've got some like kind of like former superstars involved too. It will be dream team like, and I think I don't know why if she's in the Olympics this summer, it'll be the double click into the WNBA.
We'll see. Certainly I agree. It'll be huge, and it'll be. I'd call it a dream team, except nobody will know who any of the rest of the players are. So it's more like a dream player, singular. But yeah, it'll be that big, is your point, and I agree with you completely.
She'll be the biggest star NBC features if she's on the team.
Oh yeah,
bigger than the swimmers, bigger than the track athletes. She will be the Michael Phelps of this Olympics.
Yes, for sure. Even more so than basketball. Than men's
just as an individual,
rather.
Just as a personality at the Olympics.
Correct. Yeah, no, I agree. And so does that. But I don't think Olympics, there's a history of Olympics translating into post-Olympic.
No, stardom. I'm just saying, but you just keep her in the front of pop culture, right? Which is what you want to, like, it's just her name doesn't go out of papers is the number one thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there.
And you're always going to, I mean, even if they're all, no one knows who any of these players are, I bet you pretty solid money that women's basketball in the Olympics draws more TV eyeballs than your average WNBA game right away.
I think that's true now. It's true.
That's what I'm saying. That's already true. Yeah.
But I would go so far as to say that it may beat the men's team's ratings, because the fact that matters to the men's teams, if they're all NBA players, people have seen that, done that. It's not that they won't watch it, but there's nothing exciting about it. The 1992 Dream Team was a shock to the system. It was new and it was different. It was amazing. But that is not the case anymore. And furthermore, a lot of this best NBA players don't play in the Olympics anymore. So there's not a huge amount of star power. Well, Caitlin Clark.
You probably have better competition internationally in the women's game anyway. So you actually, even with the Caitlin Clark and a WNBA superstar team, you still probably have a better level of competition. So the games will be better.
Well, maybe so. What I was about to suggest is that in the men's game, it starts to kind of look like an NBA All-Star game or something, a little bit, because a lot of these players, the players who are not American go play for other countries and whatnot. And it's the same names you've been seeing for months already. And here, she's kind of a singular force of nature, so to speak. So I think she would be the single biggest star in the Olympics. In terms of American coverage, at least.
Like I said, man, NBC, they're going to pull, and that is their number one hope.
I hope somebody's literally not sacrificing chickens, but it's possible.
Well, you can fry them up after, Steve.
Oh yeah, it's true. As long as you use them,
right.
Let's not waste it.
Yeah, right. No. Yeah, you can do both. Both things can be done. All right, before we bounce out of here, we kind of want to, we have talked about this past, so this isn't, we're bringing this up, but if you want to kind of, our one to watch, one I almost can guarantee we'll be talking about in the future, and that if it turns out, if the worst case scenario is in fact the scenario, it will be as big as the Ohtani story, I think. In fact, maybe even bigger considering the implications, but not necessarily the star quality of the player, but the implications on the management of the sport. And that's this Jontay Porter issue about basically, was he affecting prop bets on his own performance by piecing out of games, basically, and minutes played, time played, amount of stats within the game. And NBA Commissioner David Silver said this week that if those things turn out to be true, that lifetime ban is 100% on the table. And the interesting thing here is the tip-off really was a lot of bizarre action on Jontay Porter prop bets.
Yeah. Is this the Athletic? Yeah, this is the Athletic. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver says Jontay Porter was permanent ban of gambling allegations are true by Mike Vorkunov, dated April 10th. Adam Silver doesn't just throw that around casually. When we talked about this before, it was okay, Jontay Porter gambling, interesting. We'll see what happens. But the fact that Adam Silver threw that out there, guys like this don't just throw stuff out, without a purpose.
No,
Like senior executives who are in media and whatnot, they don't just say things casually. And so Adam Silver did this for a reason. And what the reason is, he wants to tell the world that the NBA is legitimately and seriously concerned about it. And if they have to throw Jontay Porter over, off the ship,
so be it.
They will do it in a heartbeat. Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned this a little bit. I think we didn't pay enough attention to this when we did this before. What brought this to light in the first place was that the prop bet action on Porter went up. Now, he's not a huge star here. And, he's not on some kind of Kobe Bryant like tear of points, So why did that happen? And then you find out that Porter allegedly is betting on himself, prop bets, but his bets all by itself wouldn't raise his profile throughout the prop bet network on DraftKings. So why is that? Something is weird and off, and it hasn't come to light yet. I think there's going to be more to this story.
Yeah, I think you don't see that much action on a stupid prop bet unless there's all kinds of tip-offs and prearrangements, right? And that's actually, people are monitoring these things all the time, right? Law enforcement, other gamblers. I mean, because first of all, everyone's looking for an edge. Take law enforcement out of it. So everyone's looking for an edge and inside angles. Like if you're really involved in these things, it's the guys at the track who can tell you that they washed the third horse with a different detergent this week. So that's
right? Going to affect them.
Yeah. So, why is everyone jumping on, minutes played prop bets for Jontay Parker? And not just everyone, but the bettors that people track. It's kind of like, what's that guy that came out with the book, with
oh yeah, we did that. Yeah.
So he talks about that kind of stuff. Like he was one of those people that when he put his money somewhere, people go, whoa, what's going on over there? Right? Like, what does he know? So that's what it was like almost that chatter. It was that noise to signal ratio type of thing. Like, why is all this signal through the noise ending up on Jontay Parker prop bets?
And the obvious question would be, is there some sort of organized activity of
right,
which
or is it a one bad egg? Yeah.
Right. Or is Jontay Porter in the middle of some, organized, activity, or is it just an accident? It's what? So that the former, meaning the organized activity part, is what the NBA wants to avoid. They can live through one gambling addict, or just like baseball, can live through Mitsuhara, especially. The NBA can live through Jontay Porter. What they can't live through is if there's some sort of conspiracy. See this word again. And I'm not saying there is one. Okay. I'm saying if there was one, that is what the NBA would be concerned about. And that is what would hurt their reputation, really hurt their reputation. So Adam Silver's trying to get ahead of it by saying we're gonna throw him off the cliff here, if we have to. That's
and the prop bets are an interesting one because that's actually something a player can control. Right. And those level of minutia and prop bets, right? That is something you could, even if a player's like tanking shots or passing up on clear looks or whatever, that's still not may affect the outcome of a game. But like minutes played or the amount of stats you have within a quarter or the level of specificity about these prop bets that you just which is exactly what he did. Like hobble off the court with a bad angle at minute 6 or whatever, or this hacking cough. It's dumb. It's my dog ate my homework stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and if the prop bet is to make something up, he has to take this many shots.
Right.
Maybe he plays outside of the rounds of the offense and takes a bunch of bad shots to, hit the number, just as an example. So that's how it can impact the game. And there can, but again, they're not concerned about Jontay Porter individually. They're concerned about
Who's pulling the strings?
Larger enterprise behind him. That is what they know that can actually hurt the NBA.
And that's not conspiratorial, by the way. That's what organized crime is.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And but my point is, we're not alleging it is. We're saying that is the concern they have.
Right.
So don't start with this.
And it would be a massive concern even if it was one bookie and one player. Even if you just started at that level of singularity, it's huge. And then if you start to extrapolate out from that,
bigger. Because again, the question would become, why is the betting on Jontay Parker and Porter in particular so increased at a time when he's betting on himself as well? I mean, is he telling? Yeah, there's no way you can see who's doing it. That's not possible to have. It's certainly not publicized on DraftKings or anything like that. So it does beg some weird questions.
Totally. So that's one to watch. Keep your eye on that. I'm sure we'll be talking about that. Even if it turns out to be hogwash, which does not look like the case, we would talk about that because it's an interesting conclusion to it. But so if you're tracking stories, keep an eye on that one. Steve, you mentioned it earlier, but you admit it. You're ready for the draft to be here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'm not even on social media anymore, and I'm sick and tired of it already. I'm ready to get over with. I'm ready to get to stop watching quarterback film because I've been watching it too much. But fortunately, we are reaching the end of our draft coverage at the Hogsty on the Hogsty podcast and in writing. We only really have quarterbacks left, and then the draft will be here. And so you can check out the show, which is released every Thursday, and all of our regular written content.
All right. And we will see you in a few weeks.